what is paint decontamination and why do we need to do it?
Hi, I'm Ivan.
I'm Nick.
And this is the DIY Detail Podcast. Decontaminating paint, clay barring, deep cleaning, all sort of mean the same thing, but what is it and why are we doing it?
It's a good question. I think a lot of people feel like it's an overrated step. They skip it. They just go ahead and polish, ceramic coat. But the truth is, decontaminating paint is so easy to understand if you see white paint, Ivan. So maybe we start there with the visual of white paint and those little orange-looking rust spots, just as visual proof of there's something going on here that you may not see on dark blue paint, for example, but it's happening on every paint.
It's happening on every vehicle. And contamination, or embedded contamination. So washing your car gets rid of the dirt. It gets rid of some of the contamination. But we have embedded contamination. And embedded contamination comes from many sources. And one of the most prolific sources is your brakes. And those little hot balls of metal or shards of metal that are coming off your brakes when you're hitting the brakes, they embed themselves and attach themselves to your paint. Now, if you have a light colored car, white, silver, take a close look right behind the wheel wells and you'll see that there's probably little spots of rust. And if you have a dark colored car and your state or province or country, the license plate is a light color, look at your license plate. There's probably contamination, embedded contamination on your license plate. And that is an easy way to tell. Now, another way to tell if your vehicle has contamination is to feel it. And when we wash the car, we can sometimes feel it and in our case, hear it with the legacy sponge. As you're dragging or bringing the sponge or your wash media across the vehicle, you'll feel sort of a hesitation and sometimes it actually sounds scratchy. That's a very contaminated vehicle. But you're a DIY detailer. You maintain your vehicle.
Or you're brand new to this and you don't quite know what feels scratchy and what feels smooth.
Right.
You don't know how to compare it to something else, so how do you have that perspective?
Yeah. One way of knowing whether your paint is contaminated or not, first of all, clean your paint. You want to make sure it's nice and clean. Then put your hand in a plastic bag, a sandwich bag, a grocery bag, whatever. Just a very thin plastic bag and lightly, no pressure, run your fingers across the paint. And you will feel if there's any contamination. That little layer of plastic does an amazing thing. It increases your sensory response. So what you can't feel with your hands, with that you will feel. Now, another way that I've always taught is to use a credit card. And people freak out, but it's actually safer than the plastic bag because most people are afraid to drag a credit card across their paint, so they're not gonna put pressure on it. Whereas the plastic bag, they tend to put pressure on. It's like, oh yeah, I can feel this. And then you see scratch marks where they did it. Whereas with the credit card, you just lightly hold the credit card between your fingers. You can flop around between your fingers and just lightly go across the paint and you will hear and feel any contamination.
When in doubt, clay it out. That's not a saying I've heard before, I just made it up. But chances are, if you're not really sure, does this paint need decontamination or not, it doesn't hurt with our decontamination process to do that. You could decontaminate your paint after every wash if you wanted to and you wouldn't hurt anything.
No.
And that's the beauty of our system. So we could talk a little bit more about how to decontaminate, but I do want to make sure we aren't going too far ahead of ourselves. This is why are we doing this in the first place? Why do we want these contaminants out of our paint? Does it matter? Is it visual only? Are there consequences if it stays longer? Let's continue that conversation.
So there are consequences. First of all, the major form of contamination is brake dust. So we'll use brake dust as our scapegoat here. With brake dust, when it gets on a paint, especially a light colored vehicle, you get moisture in the air, you get rain, all sorts of things, and that little shard of metal now starts to rust.
And it was hot off the brakes earlier, right?
It was
that's why it embeds into the clear coat, which is plastic. Hot thing, plastic, boom, it sticks.
Right, it sticks, it's there. Then, when we were washing, it's stuck to the plastic. It's not wanting to release. So when we wash, it stays there. And over time, that accumulates. And
it's not because you're not washing hard enough.
No.
It's not because you didn't drive it in there faster, or harder. You never want to use pressure when washing. So this is just stuff that is too stubborn for your regular wash.
Yeah, way too stubborn for your regular wash. Now.
And it can happen on coated or non-coated paint too. So it will happen regardless. It's not your fault. This is just what happens if you drive your car on the roads.
Yeah.
Even if you have an electric vehicle, other people still have
Yeah, brakes around you. So electric vehicles, you're using regen braking. You're not generating brake dust, but the vehicles around you are, and it's getting onto your vehicle. If you're driving down the highway, stop and go traffic, etc., in the city, wherever. But this is getting into or onto your paint, and it's holding on. Now, there are ways of removing contamination. One is, and our preferred method is the decontamination towel, or as we like to call it, the perforated synthetic decontamination towel, aka a clay towel. There's no clay in it, there's no abrasives in ours. That's why Nick said you can do it every time. Now, if you're using a clay bar, no, you're actually wearing the paint down every time you use a clay bar, because there are abrasives in it. For us, there's no abrasives. With proper lubrication, it's not going to scratch, mar, or do anything to the paint other than pluck out that contamination from the paint.
So you do not need to polish after using our system of decontamination, and that's why if you wanted to, hypothetically, you could do it after every wash.
Right. Now, you do it in conjunction with your wash. So we use Rinseless Wash or Incredible Suds. Both are great decontamination or clay lubricants. And from this point forward, we'll call it a clay towel. It's just easier to say than perforated synthetic decontamination towel. Try saying that 5 times in a row. Your tongue might get twisted. So with the clay towel, we have the Incredible Suds or Rinseless Wash as a base on the surface. We have 2 primary options going forward. One is those little iron particles. We want to remove them from the paint. If you see them, if you have those little rust stains, then we're going to use iron remover. And our iron remover is designed to be used as a clay lubricant or as a decontamination tool. Using it with the clay towel, 1 spray in the towel, 1 spray in the paint, and we just lightly go over. And our clay towel, no pressure whatsoever exerted on the towel. Just the weight of the towel on the paint. Your hands are just there to guide it. Pressure is your enemy at this point.
As always, pressure is your enemy, and proper technique is king.
Yeah.
So we do 1 panel with 1 side of the towel, which we folded into 4s.
Right.
Then we flip the towel. 1 spray of your iron remover into your towel, 1 on the paint, apply where you sprayed, and then work with no pressure until the scratchiness and the feel of it, the sound of it goes smooth.
Right. And once it goes smooth.
I close my eyes like that because it's like, you don't even need your eyes for it. You can just sort of feel it and hear it.
Yeah, you can feel it, you can hear it. It's a magical thing when all of a sudden you're going from this gritty thing to, ooh, it's smooth. Now, the other option we have, someone that maintains their vehicle more regularly, or you have a dark colored car and the rust stains just aren't there because you live in a warm environment, and dark colored cars, go to a parking lot. Don't be touching people's cars willy-nilly, but go to a dealership. They don't mind if you touch the cars. If there's a white car parked beside a black car, put your hand on both at the same time. They've both been sitting in the sun. The white car will be basically room temperature, or whatever the temperature is outside, whereas the black car will be significantly hotter. What that means is any moisture on the surface on the dark car is going to be evaporated away quickly. Whereas on the white car, it's not getting any hotter than the air, so it's not evaporating anything away. Meaning that on a light colored car, you're going to see that little ball of metal start to rust because of all the moisture around it. That's why the iron remover is there. And we call it an iron remover. It's more of a rust converter because it's actually attacking the rust. It's not going to dissolve any metal. It's not going to dissolve that piece of iron. It is going to dissolve the rust that's around that piece of iron. So we're mechanically removing it with the decontamination or the clay towel.
We're plucking it.
Yeah. And we're also leaving a bit of iron remover on the surface to just attack that little bit of rust that's in your paint. Now from there, we have another way of doing it. Use the clay towel with a bed of Incredible Suds or Rinseless Wash.
So this is post-contact wash.
Right. With ceramic gloss as your lubricant or quick beads. They both do a great job at lubricating in that form. And again, same technique. 1 spray on the towel, 1 spray on the panel. Where you sprayed, you match them up. No pressure, glide the towel across and you'll feel it. Now, in this case, we want to dry the panel as soon as we've done it because ceramic gloss and quick beads can set up and be almost like concrete. But once you've done that, your car will be smooth. It'll be easier to clean. And another thing that is very easy to see and to feel and to get a sense of is windows. Your windows need to be decontaminated as much as your paint is. And if you've taken a towel across your window, and it leaves little pieces of lint everywhere. That's the contamination on your glass ripping your microfiber and taking those little shards of lint and leaving them everywhere.
There's certain things that I know the detailers out there are going to care about. There's certain things that anybody who drives a car is going to care about. And being able to see through windows, having windows that are easy to clean, those are some real basics. That's what kind of fires me up. So clay your exterior windshield, keep your interior windows nice and clean. Obviously, that's a little bit of a tangent, but that's one thing that anybody will want is an outside window to be clean, and they're going to use a towel and it's going to get all ripped up. They're going to wonder, why is it linting? Why is it having issues? Clay your windows.
Right. So decontamination. Why do we do it? We don't want that contamination staying on the paint. And how often do we do it? If you're a daily driven car that parks outside, is doing 10, 15, 20,000 miles a year, you might want to do it every 3 months. If your garage kept, you just go to work, maybe you're doing 10,000 miles a year at most, then maybe every 6 months. The garage queen might only need it every 2 years. But when you're washing that your paint is starting to be a little gritty, or it's more difficult to dry, that's another indication that your paint is contaminated. When your towel doesn't glide across as easily as it can be, then do it. And when in doubt, decontaminate. It's that simple. And you will see and feel and be able to see the difference.
So when in doubt, clay it out was actually a pretty good saying.
Yeah, pretty
right?
good. Yeah, you had it right there. But basically, like on a white car, just doing the iron remover with the decontamination towel after your contact wash will brighten up the paint, will make it seem new again without polishing involved here. Now, decontamination is an important part of any ceramic coating service or any polishing. Before polishing, you need to decontaminate your paint.
Why?
Because, no. The reason we want to decontaminate the paint before polishing is very simple. That contamination that's on the paint, when we're polishing, we're taking an abrasive and going over the paint. Those contaminant particles are actually preventing the polish from doing its job properly. And they can cause swirls, they can load your pad up, they can do they have all sorts of negative effects on the polishing process. And it doesn't take long to polish the paint.
So the whole idea here is do each step correctly, and the next step will be as designed, right?
Exactly.
You can be polishing and get some contamination in your pad, and you may not even notice it having an effect, but it's less efficient.
Right. And same thing, if you're wanting to ceramic coat your vehicle, you want the cleanest possible paint before doing that. And even if you're not ceramic coating, you're installing a wax, a sealant, anything you're putting on your paint, you want the cleanest paint possible for it to bond to.
I also use the decontamination towel on my windshield after every wash.
Yeah.
It's great on bug guts, just things that may be a little harder to get off with your legacy sponge. You don't have to put any pressure on the decon towel. It'll just shave them right off, and it goes into my wash bucket.
Yeah.
Let's talk about real quick, how do I clean and maintain my decontamination towel?
Very easily. When you're done using it, you soak it in a clean wash bucket. From there, rinse it out. You want to rinse, making sure there's no soap or rinseless wash left.
It doesn't take long for that to happen either.
No,
people think it's how do I clean this? Just
seconds.
rinse it under a tap water, and after a few seconds, the suds are gone. You're good.
Right.
Yeah.
From there, put it on a shelf. Put it somewhere where it can dry with the clay or the synthetic surface up. Once it's dry, roll it back up and put it back in the package we shipped it to you in.
And when you roll it, you're actually rolling the diamond weave onto the perforated surface. So you're not actually getting any of it sticking to itself.
Exactly.
It's when it sticks to itself that you can get into trouble and have issues.
Yes. If you put it on your shelf and then you pack it up, it gets a little warm, it might stick to itself. Not a good situation. So either store it flat or roll it back up, but don't fold it to store it.
Last thing I want to ask is, if you don't clay your paint, will it lead to rust, corrosion? What are some issues that truly could be troubling? Not from a minor aesthetic perspective, but if I never decontaminate my paint, what happens?
Eventually that contamination will make its way through the paint, into the base coat, to the metal. It's just a natural evolution. It wants to go deeper and deeper and deeper. One form of contamination that we didn't talk about is artillery fungus. And artillery fungus, actually, if you don't get that off the vehicle soon, it starts growing and growing, and it is a fungus, so it wants to grow. But there's a lot of different types of contamination. Most of them, if they're taken off early with the decontamination towel, iron remover, or just the soap or the rinseless, it's up to you. But do a regular decontamination when you feel the need, and your paint will last longer.
How about some extra credit? How about some bonus points? One extra layer of decontamination that we haven't talked about yet, and we can do it pretty quickly, I think, is water spot remover.
Right, so water spot remover is a form of contamination we don't see, we don't feel, but we know it's there.
It goes after that contamination, the water spot remover.
Right, so the water spot remover, we generally do that as our last step before drying the vehicle. And you just lightly spray the water spot remover on, then take a damp towel, run it over the surface. What that's doing is removing mineral contamination. We call it a mineral cleanse. If you're in a northern climate where they put salt on the roads in the winter, the sides of your vehicle get cloaked in this little minuscule layer of minerals that we don't see. But they're there and they prevent beading, they prevent sheeting. Your car just isn't as clean as it should be. If you're in a coastal area, that dew in the morning that covers your car from the salt air, guess what? It's carrying salt with it. And you're getting contamination there. So if you have a ceramic coating and you're not sure of the durability, or you think your ceramic coating is dead, it may just be contaminated with minerals. And the mineral contamination, we don't see, we don't feel. There's no way of knowing it's there until you remove it.
I just enjoy the water spot remover effect on any vehicle, whether it's coated or uncoated, protected, unprotected. It's just a deep, clean step that I don't think you want to skip if the goal here is a deep clean.
Right, and that is basically what decontaminating paint is a deep cleaning. We're removing all sorts of mechanical aspects on the paint. Anything that's stuck to it, the bonded contaminants, we're taking them off. We're leaving pure, clean, pristine paint behind. That is decontamination in a nutshell. How often should you do it? When you feel the need. There's no too much, but there is in a sense. You're going to be wasting chemicals. You don't need to do it every week. You don't need to do it every month. But daily driver, maybe every 3 months. Not so often driven or garage kept every 6 months. And then from there, when you feel the need.
Ask your questions. They all get answered here on YouTube. And if you are really enjoying this sort of podcast Q&A format, we have a lot more podcasts, Ivan. And folks can find those conversations right here.